Months passed, and the storm inside Alice's heart began to settle. The weight of the betrayal, the emotional chaos, the anger, it all began to fade, replaced by a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed. Alice had taken control of her life, and with every passing day, she felt herself coming back to life. In the beginning, the healing felt slow. The pain was still fresh, the memories of Walter's betrayal lingering like a shadow. But Alice had learned something important through it all. Healing is a choice. And she chose to heal. Alice began embracing her independence in ways she never had before. For the first time in decades, she was doing things just for herself. She signed up for a painting class, something she had always wanted to try but had put off for years. She spent weekends hiking through nature, something she had loved in her youth, but had neglected for the sake of family life. Alice even took a solo trip to the beach, something she never thought she would do alone. She relished in the quiet solitude, breathing in the salty air, and reflecting on how far she had come. It wasn't just about filling her days with activities. It was about reconnecting with herself. She was learning to love the woman she was becoming, no longer defined by Walter's lies, no longer living in the shadows of someone else's choices. Alice was finally living authentically. And the more she embraced that authenticity, the more confident she became in her ability to navigate life on her own terms. Her home, once a place of secrets, had transformed into her sanctuary. Mondays were no longer dreaded days filled with lies. Instead, they became a day of freedom. A day where Alice could focus on her passions, her hobbies, and her personal growth. No more worrying about Walter's supposed illness. No more walking on eggshells, wondering when the next lie would surface. Instead, Alice embraced the quiet peace that came with living in truth. The change wasn't just external. It was internal, too. She had learned that true peace comes from within, and now Alice had that peace. She had found the courage to stand up for herself, to face the truth, and to rebuild her life from the ground up. Life after Walter wasn't always easy. There were days when the loneliness crept in, when the memories of their time together would resurface, but Alice no longer allowed those moments to define her. She was her own person now, and she was learning to navigate the world without Walter. And with each passing day, she became more vibrant, more connected to her own sense of purpose. Alice had stopped looking back at the past with regret and started looking forward to the future with hope. She had healed in ways she never imagined possible. No longer burdened by the weight of Walter's betrayal, she had become a woman stronger than she had ever been before. One afternoon, as Alice sat on her porch with a cup of tea in hand, watching the sunset over the horizon, she took a deep breath. She had come so far. The pain of the past had shaped her, yes, but it was no longer holding her hostage. She thought about everything she had been through. The years of trust, the devastation of betrayal, the process of letting go, and she realized something. It was worth it. The pain had been excruciating, but it had also taught her something invaluable. Her worth is not defined by anyone else. It never was. She had the strength within her all along. She just had to find it. "I never thought I'd get here," Alice whispered to herself, the wind carrying her words away. "But I did. I survived, and I'm better for it." Looking back on everything that had happened, Alice no longer saw herself as a victim. She saw a woman who had endured the hardest of times, faced the deepest of betrayals, and come out on the other side stronger, braver, and more determined than ever. She had walked through the fire, and now she was finally free. In the stillness of that moment, Alice smiled. The world was hers again, no longer chained by the lies of the past. She was ready to embrace the future. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time in years, she felt alive. And that was all she needed to know. Thank you for watching Alice's incredible journey of strength and survival. If you've ever faced betrayal or found the courage to start over, we'd love to hear from you. Share your story in the comments below. Your experience could inspire someone else to take that first step toward healing. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss another inspiring story. Remember, no matter how difficult life gets, it's never too late to reclaim your happiness and begin again. You have the power to create your own story. Take control today. Have you ever felt like something was just off? Like everything in your life was a carefully crafted lie waiting to be uncovered? Imagine spending years trusting someone, only to realize that every word, every action, was part of a bigger deception you could never have seen coming. This is the true story of a woman who thought she knew her husband, thought her life was perfect, until one day she discovered the shocking truth. Every Monday he pretended to be sick, but the truth behind his illness would change everything. What happens when a woman's trust is shattered and she finally decides to confront the lies she's been living with? You won't believe what she uncovered when the walls of deception came crashing down. Stick around to hear this heart-wrenching tale of betrayal, and find out how one woman found the strength to rebuild her life after discovering the shocking truth about her husband and the secret he'd been hiding for years. Before we dive in, make sure to hit the like button, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe if you haven't already. Trust me, this story will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about love and betrayal. Meet Alice, a woman who, for years, believed she had everything she could ever ask for. She was a devoted wife, dedicated to her family, and always put others before herself. Every morning she woke up early to make Walter's favorite breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee. She made sure the house was clean and cozy, the smell of freshly baked pies filling the air as she worked in the kitchen. Her life was simple, yet satisfying. She took pride in keeping their home organized and their lives running smoothly. Walter, her husband of nearly 4 decades, was a hard-working man. A mechanic by trade, he spent his days at the shop, fixing cars and doing what he loved. Alice admired his dedication to his work and always supported him. Sundays were spent together, enjoying family meals, and Mondays were her special day, her cleaning day. She enjoyed the routine of mopping the floors, washing the laundry, and dusting the furniture. By the end of the day, she felt a sense of completion, knowing her home was perfect for Walter to come home to after a long day's work. But there was something strange that began happening every Monday. Walter, for reasons Alice couldn't quite understand, started to feel sick. It began innocently enough. Walter would complain of stomach pains, and Alice, being the loving wife she was, would make him tea and offer comfort. It was only every Monday, though, and Alice didn't think much of it at first. It just seemed like an unfortunate coincidence. However, over time, she started to notice little things that didn't add up. The way he'd retreat into the bathroom and lock the door behind him, the long, restless showers, the sudden insistence on being left alone. Alice began to question it all, but she brushed it aside. She was too committed to their marriage, too determined to believe the best of Walter. After all, he was her husband and she trusted him. Or at least that's what she thought. As the years went by, the pattern of Walter's illness became all too familiar. Every Monday, like clockwork, Walter would come home from the shop around 2 p.m., just as he always did. He'd eat a light lunch, then retreat to the bathroom, claiming his stomach was acting up. Alice, ever the loving wife, would make him tea or a light meal and wait patiently for him to feel better. But over time, this routine started to feel too predictable. Walter's illness was always the same stomach pains, the same reluctance to go to the doctor, the same insistence that it wasn't anything serious. It was as if the sickness never varied in severity, never seemed to get better or worse. Alice began to wonder, How could something so chronic never change? How could Walter always be the same, yet always in pain? She asked him if he'd like to go to the doctor, but each time he refused, brushing her concerns aside with a wave of his hand. "It's just a thing I've been dealing with," he'd say. "No need to go see anyone about it." Alice wanted to believe him. After all, she trusted him more than anyone. But something was starting to feel off. The Mondays began to take on a more mysterious tone. Walter's need for isolation grew more intense. He would lock the bathroom door with an urgency that unsettled Alice. The sound of the shower running for long stretches, the endless turning on and off of water, these were all part of the ritual now. Sometimes she would knock on the door to check if he needed anything, only to hear him call back, his voice strained, "I'm fine. Alice, just leave me alone for a bit." But she could never shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. And then there was the phone. Alice had noticed it. Walter always took his phone with him into the bathroom. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Maybe he was just distracted by it while trying to deal with his illness. But as the weeks went on, she began to notice something strange. Every time Walter emerged from the bathroom, his phone seemed to be dead. The battery, which was never drained before, was always empty, as if he'd been using it nonstop in there. The more she thought about it, the stranger it became. Why did he need the phone in the bathroom? What could he possibly be doing for 2 hours that required him to be so alone, so private? There were other details that didn't sit right. Alice never heard the toilet flush, even though Walter was supposedly in there for hours. And when he came out, he was always clean. His clothes were neatly pressed, his hair combed. It was as if he hadn't spent all that time in the bathroom at all. There was no sign of the illness he claimed to have. No flushed face, no signs of discomfort. He would come out looking fine, as though nothing had ever been wrong. Her heart sank with each passing Monday. Alice had long suspected that something was going on, but she refused to believe the truth. She didn't want to. It was easier to accept that Walter had some mysterious condition than to admit the possibility that he was hiding something far darker. But the signs were all there. The lies, the secrets, the constant need for privacy. And yet, Alice pushed the growing suspicion aside. She didn't want to face it. How could she? The idea of Walter betraying her in some way was too painful to even consider. So she carried on, convincing herself that everything would be fine. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Months passed, and with each passing Monday, Alice's suspicions grew. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, but she still pushed it aside, hoping the truth would stay hidden. However, that all changed the day she found the first clue. It wasn't much at first, just a small detail she hadn't noticed before. One afternoon, as she was sorting through the mail, Alice stumbled upon an unusual phone bill. There were calls, long ones on Mondays around the same time Walter claimed to be sick, calls that lasted an hour, sometimes longer. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw the number listed, a number she didn't recognize. It was odd. Walter had always been secretive about his phone calls, but this was different. This wasn't just a random number. It was consistent, always at the same time. She confronted him, asking casually, "Who is this number you've been calling so often?" Walter quickly dismissed it, mumbling something about a business call. But Alice wasn't convinced. Something about the way he avoided eye contact told her there was more to it. The next Monday, as the illness routine unfolded once again, Alice couldn't help but replay the phone bill in her mind. Why did he need to keep making these calls? Why was he hiding it from her? She started connecting the dots. The strange, lengthy bathroom visits, his constant use of the phone in there, his need for privacy, the fact that he'd never truly been sick. It all started to make sense in a way she wasn't ready to accept. Then came the final clue. It was a small, seemingly insignificant moment that would change everything. Alice was tidying up in the kitchen when she overheard Walter talking from the bathroom. The door was cracked open just enough for her to hear his voice, muffled but unmistakable. What she heard next sent chills down her spine. "Yes, my love, I'll take care of it. I miss you too." Walter's voice was soft, tender, in a way she'd never heard him speak before. Her breath caught in her throat. There was no mistaking it now. He wasn't talking to himself. He was talking to someone else. Someone who wasn't her. Alice's heart raced as the truth became painfully clear. He wasn't sick. He was hiding something. Someone. And that someone was more than just a casual acquaintance. Alice knew it was time to confront the truth. She couldn't live in denial any longer. That's when the final painful decision was made. Enough was enough. She grabbed the nearest thing she could find, a heavy knife from the kitchen, and marched toward the bathroom door. With a deep breath, she took a step back, raised the knife, and slammed it into the lock, breaking it open with a force that matched the years of betrayal she had suffered. The door flew open with a creak, revealing Walter sitting on the edge of the bathtub, fully dressed and clutching his phone in his hands. His face froze as he looked up at Alice. The sight was nothing like what she had imagined. He wasn't lying in pain, struggling with illness. He was talking to someone on the other end of that phone screen. It was her sister. "Hello, sister-in-law," came the voice from the phone, startling Alice to her core. Diane, the woman Alice had mourned for years, was smiling from the screen as though nothing was wrong. The very woman Alice had trusted, the sister she had missed, was the one Walter had been speaking to all along. The woman her husband had been sneaking away to talk to every Monday for nearly a decade. Alice's world shattered in that moment. She stared at Walter, her heart breaking as she realized everything she had built, everything she thought she knew, had been nothing but a lie. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted with her life, had been hiding this secret from her all these years. Walter's voice trembled as he tried to explain, but Alice was done listening. "I can't believe you," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Walter stood up, attempting to justify his actions, but Alice didn't want to hear it anymore. She had seen enough. The truth was out. Her husband had been leading a double life, using the time he claimed was spent sick in the bathroom to talk to Alice's sister, Diane. A secret relationship built on lies and betrayal. How long? Alice asked, her voice cracking with the weight of the question. "How long have you been seeing her?" "It started years ago, Alice," Walter admitted, his voice faltering. "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you." But Alice wasn't listening anymore. The heartbreak in her chest was too much to bear, but something stronger was rising within her. She was done with the lies, done with the deceit. The truth had been exposed, and Alice was left to pick up the pieces of her broken heart. Alice stood there, her breath shallow, her mind racing as the truth of Walter's betrayal sunk deeper into her chest. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted, had been lying to her for years. There was no denying it now, no avoiding the harsh reality of what had been happening behind her back, and she couldn't let him manipulate her any longer. "Walter," she whispered, her voice steady but laced with heartbreak. "How could you? How could you do this to me?" The words felt like shards of glass, painful and sharp, but Alice wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't afraid to face the truth. She had been living in a lie for so long, but now the truth had come crashing down, and she wasn't going to let Walter get away with it. Walter's eyes were wide, his face pale with guilt and fear, but Alice wasn't interested in his excuses anymore. She wasn't interested in hearing him beg or plead for forgiveness. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about truth. "No more lies, Walter," she said, her voice unwavering. "Tell me everything." "The full truth. I deserve that much," Walter stammered, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to form words. But no more words could fix this. No more excuses could undo the damage he had caused. It started so long ago, Walter confessed, his voice quiet and trembling. I didn't mean for it to happen, Alice. It just did. So it was all just an accident? Alice shot back, her voice sharp now. You didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. For years, every Monday. All these lies. What kind of man does this? Walter's face was a mixture of guilt and fear, but Alice wasn't done. She had been afraid of his words for too long. She had let his lies define her reality, but now it was her turn to take control. You were never sick, were you? Alice asked, her voice trembling with the weight of the question. All this time you were spending hours with her. My own sister. You've been with her, haven't you? Walter dropped his head, unable to meet her gaze. The silence spoke volumes. Alice's heart shattered as she looked at him, finally seeing him for who he truly was. A man who had lied, a man who had betrayed her in the worst way possible. You and Diane, Alice said, her voice breaking. You took everything from me, everything I thought I had, my trust, my love, my sister. Her words were sharp, filled with the raw pain of betrayal. But there was a new strength in her voice, too. A strength she hadn't known she had. Walter's voice was soft now, full of regret, but Alice wasn't interested in hearing it. She had heard enough of his excuses. It was time for him to hear the truth, from her. You betrayed me, Walter, she said. You ruined everything we built together, everything I believed in. And for what? A secret life with my sister? A fantasy? You think you can just hide it all and get away with it? Well, not anymore. Walter tried to speak, but Alice held up her hand, silencing him. She had no more time for his words. She had been living in the shadow of his lies for too long. Now it was time to step into the light. I can't do this anymore, she whispered. It's over. And with that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Walter standing there, his guilt and regret hanging heavy in the air. But Alice wasn't done yet. She had to confront the person who had hurt her the most, the person who had known the truth all along. Her own sister, Diane. With trembling hands, Alice grabbed the phone and dialed the number she never thought she would call. When Diane answered, Alice's heart pounded in her chest. Diane, Alice said, her voice cold, distant. We need to talk. Diane's voice was calm, almost too calm, as if she had been waiting for this moment. I knew you would find out eventually, Diane said, her tone surprisingly nonchalant. It's been going on for years, Alice. We never meant for you to find out like this. But it just happened. How could you do this to me? Alice asked, her voice breaking. You were my sister. You were the one person I trusted the most in this world. And you chose to betray me. You chose him over me. Diane's response was calm, almost indifferent. I didn't choose him, Alice. It just happened. I was lonely. He was lonely. We connected. It was never supposed to hurt you. Never supposed to hurt me? Alice repeated, her voice growing louder now. You knew what you were doing. You knew you were tearing my world apart. And yet, you kept doing it. You kept lying to me, hiding from me. Diane's voice wavered slightly. I'm sorry, Alice. I never meant to hurt you. But by the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. We had already... No! Alice cut her off, her pain transforming into anger. You knew. You knew what you were doing. You knew how much it would hurt me. But you didn't care. You just wanted him. And you took him from me. My husband, the man I trusted, and my sister, the woman I loved. You both betrayed me in ways I can never forgive. Diane was silent for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was small, regretful. I never meant for it to go this far, Alice. I'm sorry. Sorry? Alice repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Sorry isn't going to fix this. It's too late for apologies. With a final cold goodbye, Alice hung up the phone. The truth had come out. Walter had lied to her. Diane had betrayed her, and everything she thought she knew had been shattered. But in that moment, Alice realized something. The truth, no matter how painful, was finally out in the open, and she was free. She had stood up for herself. She had confronted the betrayal head-on, and now she was ready to reclaim her life, her dignity, her future. After the confrontation, Alice was left standing in the middle of the storm. The truth had been laid bare. Walter, the man she had shared her life with, the man she had trusted with her heart, had been living a lie for years. But now, for the first time in her life, Alice felt something she hadn't in a long time. Clarity. The weight of the betrayal still lingered in her chest, but something else was taking root. Strength. She wasn't going to let Walter's actions define her anymore. She wasn't going to let the lies and deception control her future. The decision was clear. Walter was going to leave. Alice turned to face him, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. "Pack your things, Walter. You're not welcome here anymore. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Walter looked at her with pleading eyes, but Alice wasn't swayed. The man who had spent years deceiving her had no place in her home anymore. She had given him everything she had, only to discover that he had given his heart to someone else. And now, with one final, painful decision, she was taking back control of her life. "Please, Alice, we can fix this," Walter begged, his voice trembling. But Alice stood firm. "No, it's over, Walter. I'm not going to keep living this lie. You need to leave." The words felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders. As Walter gathered his things, Alice felt a wave of relief wash over her. The house that had once felt like a prison, weighed down by secrets, was suddenly lighter. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew it would be better than this. In the days that followed, Alice began the process of moving on. She didn't rush it. She allowed herself to grieve, but she also made a commitment to herself to never let this betrayal define who she was. She started filling the empty spaces in her heart with things that made her feel whole again. Reading books, taking long walks, cooking her favorite meals, and spending time with the people who truly mattered. The first step was the divorce. With a clear mind and a newfound sense of independence, Alice contacted a lawyer. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face whatever came next. The pain of the betrayal still stung, but it no longer held the power it once did. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about closure. It was about freedom. Her children, of course, had their own feelings about what had happened. Each of them reacted in their own way, but one thing was clear. Alice wasn't alone in this. They were standing by her, supporting her as she navigated the storm of emotions and legal processes. Her son, Stephen, ever the protector, was the first to call. "Mom, I don't care what happens with Dad. We're with you. We'll make sure you're okay." Megan, her daughter, was a rock, just as she had always been. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. You've always been strong, but what you did, what you're doing now, is next level. I'll be here every step of the way." Brian, her youngest, struggled with the idea of his father leaving. He had always been the peacemaker, the one who tried to smooth things over. But even he couldn't deny the truth. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I don't want to choose sides. But if you're okay with it, I'm behind you 100%. Alice could feel the weight of their support. It wasn't just the legal papers and the paperwork. It was the way her children had stepped up for her, the way they had rallied around her with love and understanding. They may have been hurting too, but together they would heal. The divorce proceedings were never easy. Walter fought it at first, trying to plead his case, asking Alice to reconsider. But it was too late. She had made up her mind and nothing could change that. Walter tried to manipulate her, even making promises of change, but Alice saw through it. She had been his partner for years, but now she was her own. She had to be. In the courtroom, Alice's lawyer laid out the case. They worked through the finances, the property division, and everything that would allow Alice to move forward. Walter's attempts to sway things in his favor were weak and desperate. It became clear that his apologies and promises meant nothing in the eyes of the law. What mattered now was Alice's future. During this time, Alice focused on her own healing. She found solace in the simplest things: the smell of fresh flowers in the garden, the sound of birds singing outside her window, the quiet mornings spent in peace. Slowly, she began to rediscover herself, to see a woman who was not defined by the years of betrayal, but by her strength to rise above it. One evening, as she sat at the kitchen table sipping a cup of tea, Alice thought about what had happened. She realized that the pain of the past would always be a part of her, but it didn't have to control her. She had the power to choose how she moved forward. She could let the betrayal break her, or she could use it as a stepping stone to something better, and Alice chose better. With the divorce finalized, Alice finally had the freedom to breathe. She was no longer weighed down by Walter's lies. The house, once filled with secrets and resentment, became her sanctuary. She began redesigning the spaces, painting the walls with colors she loved, rearranging furniture to suit her tastes. Each change was an act of reclaiming her space, her life. Her children continued to support her, each one processing the betrayal in their own way, but ultimately coming together as a family once again. Stephen remained mostly distant from Walter, unable to forgive him. Megan, on the other hand, kept a firm boundary with both Walter and Diane. Brian was the most conflicted, but even he understood that this was what had to be done. Together they began to heal from the damage Walter's actions had caused. Alice's life was her own now. It wasn't easy, but she was learning to love the woman she was becoming. There was a quiet strength in her that she hadn't known was there before. She had been through the worst kind of betrayal, but she had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to live a life of truth. The divorce, the betrayal, it was all behind her now. And in its place, Alice was building a new life, a life that was hers to control, a life that was free from the lies of the past. She was no longer defined by what Walter had done, but by how she chose to move forward. And for the first time in years, she felt at peace. This was just the beginning. Alice wasn't just surviving. She was thriving.